What's the best head tracking device for Microsoft Flight Simulator? Well, in my opinion, it's the Tobii Eye Tracker 5, and this is my config guide, designed to help you get the best experience. It's recommended you watch my previous video, link in the notes below, which includes a full review and install. Welcome to the SimHanger, my name's Mark and thanks for watching. And thanks also to our friends at FS Academy for sponsoring this video. We'll get started straight after this flight training information. Do you want to be a better pilot? Is it time for you to turn pro and master the same skills as a real pilot, but do so at your own pace in an easy module by module format designed by a real airline captain? If your answer is yes, then FS Academy has got you covered, with training mission packs covering visual flight training. Or take it up a notch and get your virtual instrument rating. Get to grips with the instruments in your cockpit. Navigate across country like a pro with Navigator. And so much more. And they're sensibly priced. Want to know more? Details in the link below. It's recommended you watch the whole video so you don't miss anything, but there are timestamps in the notes below this video for your future reference. Start up Tobii Experience and click on the cog icon. And this will bring up your setting options. Here you have the option to enable or disable the Tobii. Under that is improved calibration. It's important that you go through this calibration process of staring at the various dots so it can track your eyes correctly. The setting under that is where you can enable or disable the Tobii Ghost Bubble. And this shows you where your eyes are tracking. You'll find this helpful for when you're doing your settings, but normally this will be set to off. There are a number of different eye tracking options to help those that may have a visual impairment. For most, this will be set to both eyes. The next option is also a very important one, where you can select the monitor if you're using multiple monitors, but more importantly, this is where you calibrate the position of the Tobii Eye Tracker in relation to your monitor by moving the indicated arrows left or right so that the dotted lines match up with the physical lines on the Tobii device. Now back to the settings menu. If we scroll down, we can see there is a create new profile option. You can do this if more than one person is using the Tobii Eye Tracker, but of course you can always create more than one profile for yourself. Perhaps one for a dimly lit room and one for a brightly lit room and so on. We're now in the sim and there's a number of steps I recommend you do before taking to the skies with your Tobii Eye Tracker. Head to your control options menu, and the first thing you'll want to do is scroll the top menu bar to make sure the Tobii Eye Tracker has been identified. There it is. There may be a number of profiles already loaded with the Tobii Eye Tracker, but the one we're interested in is the default profile. I recommend you create your own profile by going to Preset Manager and then selecting Duplicate and give it an appropriate name. In this case, I've already done that. My profile is called SimHanger. Now just go ahead and select that. The default profile can't be overwritten, so creating your own profile allows you to make changes as you go. We're not done here yet. Once again, from the top menu bar, select Keyboard. And once selected, we're going to head to the Search by Input to check we've got an essential configuration. Click in the box to make it active, and then press the F12, function key number 12. And we should see Eye Tracking Reset configured to that button, and it's under Camera. If for some reason it's not there, search by name and configure it. You can of course choose an alternative to the default F12 button. I also had a change livery option configured to that key that wouldn't have conflicted, but I deleted it anyway as I don't use it. I know it says eye tracking, but it's for eye and head tracking. Eye Tracking Reset repositions you in the pilot seat. One more recommended step, going to delete the search by input, and I'm now going to search by name. And I'm going to type in toggle head tracking. Typed in toggle head and it comes up, and chances are this will not be configured on your system. Configure this to your keyboard or a button on your joystick. I chose Shift plus backslash, but you can choose anything you want, and this action simply turns on or off your Tobii device and is highly recommended. That's it for now. Click OK, don't forget to apply and save, and let's head back to our cockpit. If this is your first session of the day in Microsoft Flight Simulator, you may find that the Tobii Eye Tracker has positioned you behind the pilot's seat. You need to reset your position, so hit F12 and then F12 for the second time, and you'll find yourself in the pilot seat. Interesting to note, you can still use your normal camera views even with the Tobii Eye Tracker active. At this stage your settings will still be default, so it's a great opportunity for you to look around and get a feel for what the default settings are like, and whether or not they suit you. Chances are you'll want to make some changes. To make changes, you're going to need to know where the in-sim settings are and what the various settings do. We'll be back to our configuration guide shortly, but for those interested today, I'm in the Milviz Cessna 310R. It's payware and currently my favorite GA aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator. You may have also noticed that we're at Rochester Airport, and this again is payware from one of my favorite developers, Burning Blue Designs, and features their typical attention to detail. Rochester is a small GA airport in southeastern England. I would guess its main claim to fame is its home for the Short brothers. They produced a wide range of aircraft here, the most famous being the Short S-25 Sunderland, often referred to and nicknamed the Flying Porcupine, due to its formidable defensive capabilities. Link to Rochester in the notes below. Price is just under £13. There is a collision issue when entering the open hangars, so you need to be aware of that. The developers are, and I think this is more a sim issue than a developer problem. Burning Blue Designs have done a good job on capturing the essence of this airport. Not sure if it's related to the collision issue or not, but there is a small FPS hit on using this airport. Back to our config and back to the control options menu. Make sure that Tobii is the active peripheral, and you'll note no settings are displayed. That's because they're all under the Sensitivity tab. Here we'll see a variety of different settings. At first glance they may seem a little confusing, but worry not, I'll take you through each one and explain what it does. All settings are configured via a slider bar, and the first one is eye versus head tracking ratio. As this is the first device to use both head and eye tracking, this has created some confusion. The Tobii Eye Tracker 5 tracks your head and your eyes separately. For head tracking, there's no limitation. You can use it on any size monitor. You can use it with 2 or 3 or more monitors. Your head movements are tracked by 3 sensors. Your eyes are tracked using a camera, and it's logical, therefore, that it can only track your eyes providing it can see them. Once you turn your head 90 degrees or so, well, it can't see your eyes, so it can't track them. And this is where the limitation comes in. The visual cone, as it were, coming out of the camera is about 40 degrees. So if you're using a bigger monitor than that recommended above, what it means is your eye tracking may not take you all the way to the edges of your monitor. And of course, Tobii's recommendations are conservative. I'm personally using eye tracking on a 32-inch LG monitor with absolutely no problems at all. For the eye versus head tracking ratio, the slider bar represents how much the head tracking contributes to the overall movement in relation to the eye tracking. The default setting is 0.85 or 85% head tracking, so 15% eye tracking. My setting is also 0.85. This has worked well for me. Let's go back to the cockpit and see the impact. The way to test this is sit in the pilot seat looking straight ahead. Keep your head still and then just glance with your eyes, left, right, up and down, to gauge the amount of movement you're getting. If you want more eye movement, turn the slider down. If you want eye tracking to contribute less, turn the slider up. Let me demonstrate again. I'm going to turn the head tracking to 100%, so I'm effectively turning off eye tracking. I'll now head back to my Cessna 310 and do the same test. The Tobii device is active, and I'm now looking up, down, left and right, and there's no movement. Eye tracking is disabled, but I can still use the head tracking and look around if I want to. Hope that makes sense. Back to our sensitivities. All settings have a reset function. If you click on that, it will set it back to the Tobii default. Let's move on to eye tracking responsiveness. My setting is 0.45. The default setting is 0.5. And what this setting does is determine how quickly or how slowly the camera view will change in reaction to you glancing with your eyes left, right, up or down. Turn the setting down, and when you glance at something, the camera view will change very slowly. Turn it up to 1 and it'll be almost instant. Turn it to 0 and you've disabled eye tracking again. The next setting is head tracking sensitivity, pitch and yaw. Pitch is when you move your head up or down. You're looking up or looking down. That is pitch. Yaw is when you look to the left or the right. So this setting controls both up, down, left and right settings. The default setting is 2.0, my setting is 1.0. The higher the setting, the more the camera will move in relation to your head movement. So fundamentally, with a setting of 2, if you look 45 degrees, you'll be looking 90 degrees. So if you're physically looking 90 degrees to your left, you'll be actually looking in camera directly behind you. If you're a fighter pilot or something like that, well, you'll probably want this setting. What I've given you is just an example. Actually, they're not all directly proportional. My setting of 1 was chosen simply because I don't often look behind me. This will apply to those flying airliners as well. If I turn my head about 30 degrees, I was actually looking at about 45-50 degrees. And when I turn my head about 45-50 degrees, I was looking 90 degrees. For a GA bush pilot like me, well, that's perfect. For you, it depends on what you fly and what you prefer. It's a trial and error. The center stabilization setting determines how sensitive or otherwise the camera is when it's close to its default pitch and yaw central position. In effect, it's like having a dead zone on your joystick or your yoke, and can help prevent or reduce those unwanted tiny head movements. Turn it up to make it less sensitive, and turn it down to make it more sensitive. The default setting is 0.20, my setting 0.35. Let's now move on to head tracking sensitivity roll. Roll is like using your ailerons, where you tilt your head either left or right. This is one of the 6 degrees of freedom. The parameters governing this setting are exactly the same as head tracking sensitivity, pitch and yaw. Default setting is 1, my setting is 1, which represents basically 1-to-1 movement. Set yours to suit your personal preference. Let's now move on to head tracking sensitivity position. And of all the settings, I consider this one the most important, and the one most likely to give you problems, because the Tobii default setting for some strange reason is 0, which in effect has disabled this function. And this setting governs the last 3 degrees of freedom we haven't covered. And they are up and down, not looking up or down, but physically moving up or down. And also physically moving to the left or to the right. And lastly, but most importantly, the zoom, leaning back or leaning forward. So this setting covers your physical movement within the cockpit. The bottom line here is you need a setting minimum of 1. If you turn it down below 1, you'll lose the zoom feature. You won't be able to lean forward or lean backwards. Move the slider above 1, and as was the case previously, it affects the amount of camera movement made and increases that in relation to your physical movement. However, there is what I can only consider to be a bug, and you need to be aware of this. And I hope Tobii will be fixing this in a future update. If for any reason you move head tracking sensitivity position to a number less than 1, as stated, you will lose the zoom option. When you move it back to 1 or more, you will find 9 times out of 10 you still don't have the zoom feature. It has mysteriously disappeared. The only solution I've found, and if you know of a better one, please let me know in the comments below, is reset it back to 1, save the changes, and you need to exit Microsoft Flight Simulator completely. Restart the Sim and Tobii Experience, and you'll find normal services have been resumed. And finally on to our last setting, which is head tracking auto center. And this only has 2 settings, 0 or 1. It'll not auto center if it's on 0, but it will slowly and progressively auto center if set to 1. Experiment with both. This is simply personal preference. I have it set to 0. If I need to reset my position, I simply use the F12 button or key. So will my settings be perfect for you? Well, everybody's different. Fly different aircraft. The settings that I've given you here today is what suits me. It's a good balance for both GA and airline flying. And it's a result of having invested some time in finding the right settings. And for you, you're going to have to do the same. But at the end, well, the reward is well worth it. Right now, this is as close as you can get to a VR experience without strapping oversized goggles to the front of your face. I've included a short troubleshooting guide here for those that are experiencing problems. Now I'll also take the opportunity to answer a few frequently asked questions. And I'll start with those. How does it operate in a dimly lit room? Well, it operates very well indeed. I've also used it in a very brightly lit room and no problems. If, however, you've got a large window directly behind you and it's bright sunshine streaming through the window, well then its behavior becomes a little erratic at times. It's not as sensitive as TrackIR, but it does have an impact. If you're looking for information in terms of the zoom feature, leaning forwards and back, well, watch the configuration section for a solution. Will it work with a 60-inch TV? As mentioned previously, head tracking is not impacted by the size of the monitor or TV, only the eye tracking. Watch the config section for more details. Can you mount it on top of your monitor as opposed to the bottom? My answer is yes, you could, but it's not recommended. I found head tracking fine, but it did impact negatively on my eye tracking. I can't recommend it. Is it better than TrackIR? Well, that's a matter of personal preference. For me, the answer is yes. Let's now turn to some troubleshooting guides that may help you if you're having problems. If after hitting F12 twice you're not in the pilot seat, chances are you haven't calibrated correctly. Do it again. But you can change your position in the cockpit by changing your physical position and then hitting F12, and the Tobii Eye Tracker will attempt to reseat you. Anybody who uses VR will be very familiar with this method. So for example, if I lean forward and then press F12, Tobii Eye Tracker will attempt to re-centralize my position. So when I assume my normal position, Tobii Eye Tracker has moved me further back. I've done it again and now I'm behind the pilot seat. Here's another example. I lean all the way out to the left, press F12, and it's positioned me further to the right than what I was. This method is best for just making minor adjustments. I hope it makes sense. When you first plugged in your Tobii Eye Tracker 5, it automatically downloaded the software and installed. It's very important that this is kept up to date, and there's two separate pieces of software that need updating. The first is your driver, and that comes via the Windows update. So keep your Windows up to date at all times. The second piece of software is the Tobii Experience, and that is updated through the Windows Store. To find it, go to Windows Store and then in the bottom left, select Library. With the filter set on all, it shows all the apps that have been installed. This would have been installed when you plugged in the Tobii Eye Tracker 5, but for some strange reason it often is not visible. In the top search bar, type in Tobii. In my case, Tobii Experience shows up and it shows as installed. I can check that by clicking on Open, and the app should open. There we go, installed. I can now close that. If it's not installed, you should install it. Having seen it's installed, now I go back to my library, clicking in the lower left again, and lo and behold, Tobii Experience is there. It's always a good idea to do this once a week for all your apps and click Get Updates. If for any reason Tobii hasn't installed, go to Tobii Gaming and from the main page select Downloads. Then select Tobii Eye Tracker and from the drop-down box select Eye Tracker 5. This will provide you with a manual driver that you can install on your PC. You'll see other software on the page, Tobii Ghost and Tobii Game Hub. Leave them alone, you don't need them. Tobii Experience has taken care of that. Just above the Download Driver tab is Release Notes. If we click on that, we can see the latest update, which is not yet available on Windows Store. Then from the top menu, select Gaming and then Tutorials. And once we're on the tutorials page, there is one available for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Select this for more information and further assistance. You'll find further help under the Tobii Help Center, including options to download Tobii Experience and the Tobii drivers separately. However, these are very unlikely to be needed, but they're here as a resource if required. One point to note, if you do opt to install these, you need to do a full and complete uninstall of the Tobii Eye Tracker. Details for this also on their page. Well, I trust this was of some help to some of you. Thanks for joining me. Take care, look after yourself, see you again soon, and bye for now.